today is going to be starting with a opening talk, a little fireside chat without the fire, and then we're going to have a panel discussion after that. So we're really thrilled to have some of the top experts in the field with us, telling us how they see the market, how they see financing trends. We're going to start with our chat with Liesl Copland. She is Executive Vice President of Content and Platform Strategy at Participant. I don't think I really need to tell you what Participant does, but just to mention a few credits. Some of these were before Liesl's time there, but An Inconvenient Truth, Roma, Green Book, Spotlight, Citizen4, and then this year at the Oscars, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. So just some amazing work that's truly had an impact on the industry and on society. Liesl also is formerly an executive at Endeavor, at Netflix, at Cinetic. So she is, I think, one of the guiding lights of our industry. And she's gonna not like me saying that. That means she's got to guide us to the next stages. So I'd like to welcome Liesl up, please. Welcome. You could sit right there. Yes. I'm glad we don't have a fireside because it would be a little warm, even warmer up here. Yeah. Yes, we have so much we could talk to Liesl about. I kind of want to do this for about 3 hours, but it might get a bit hot. So we'll try to be compact, but there's so much we can talk to you about. First of all, I'd just like to ask you, where do you see Participants' unique place in the market, a sort of unique position that you have?
Well, thanks to the Marché first for being here. Thank you, Wendy, for asking us to participate. Participant loves to participate, so we're really happy to be here. We love coming to Cannes. And, I think our unique value in the marketplace, we've been really talking about this a lot after 18 years in the space. We are a partner company, right? And so we can really partner with everyone and anyone along the chain of let's say we're talking about film here today, though we do film, documentary, and scripted television, non-scripted television. And we like to think about us partnering with artists, partnering with impact organizations, partnering with other financiers, partnering with distributors. And what that does uniquely in a European context is I think we have a long history of really great co-distribution relationships with, any kind of distributor in the space. And I think traditionally overseas, investors and producers are looking to value the U.S. And I think we can be a brand for those partners and partner with them uniquely in the U.S. But to be super clear, what we mean by partnership is, we can finance development, we can finance and co-finance production, we can co-finance with distributors, we partner and finance impact work. Mm-hmm. We have a unique department within our company that we call campaigns and engagement, which is part traditional media marketing, part awards marketing, part impact work. And that impact work is really kind of our special sauce. Mm. And we think that impact creates marketing and marketing creates impact. And so we're really looking to, and the stories that we support and board in any of those times. In the one thing I missed was we actually can partner and co-acquire films with distributors. And, we pick up films at Sundance and global film festivals, regularly with other companies. And so, the flywheel of the company is really there to create resonance and that, in some of our campaigns that we do, the movie is the message. And some of the campaigns that we do incredibly deep work around creating awareness and, finding ways to create capacity for nonprofits to use the film to advance their work. Mm. And that adds audience. And it's sort of the way I think about it in a traditional media context is sort of like off-balance sheet marketing. So because we put a tremendous amount of financial resources into that work. And we're always guided by our distribution partners, but collaborate we do. And we have great deals like that with everyone.
Yeah. We should probably mention that even though you do this great social campaigns, Participant is not a charity. Is it? It's a real business.
No, I have to look at you, so I'm turning our chairs. No, I think there was a comment over 10, 15 years ago. Jeff Skoll founded the company in 2004, just on the belief that a story well told could change the world. And He's a massive philanthropist in his work. One of the early, first employees at eBay and co-founders of eBay, and Pierre Midyar also came from eBay and does a lot of impact work. And so I think there's great philanthropic work out in the world where people are also doing good in the world. And Jeff funds social entrepreneurs through the Skull Foundation. He has clean tech investing, something he's been doing for decades. And his media and storytelling unit is really us, and it's a for-profit company.
Yes.
We
remind.
Yeah, when we fund impact work, there's no revenue against that at the moment. So it's separate and apart from how we fund a traditional piece of media in film or documentary, and what that means is that's what I mean. It's off balance sheet. That impact work, which creates audience, creates a lot of awareness, and in a lot of cases creates usable extra content for our distribution partners. Judas and the Black Messiah had a lot of content that we fully funded that Warner Brothers used in a context to kind of create audience awareness. And so it's a real value add to the distributors. But the value is all along the chain, from the artists to the impact work and to the for-profit side, because I think that off-balance sheet marketing creates profitability.
We're talking about some of this socially conscious filmmaking and storytelling that you do. I mean, do you think every film needs to be conscious socially, or is that just every film you work with need to be conscious?
I don't know if I'd say I think every film needs to be, but what I think I see, and I've been, my career across 25 years, let's say, and you mentioned the places I've worked, but I had an awakening early when I was at Cinetic, which was in the documentary, first of many documentary heydays, let's say. And you realize the power of that story medium. And I think in the state of the world today, there's never been a better time to want to make a piece of content to make a difference or to create awareness for something, or just kind of move people's hearts and minds, or create narrative change, or whatever the case may be, because I think that the state of the world is what it is, but the direct audience nature of every piece of talent in the space, what we see is that there's just, everyone talks about impact, and to cut through, this massive content overwhelm that we're in with, it's that cutting through can come from something that resonates. That's why we gathered around the fire in the beginning, right? Storytelling was to move the community that they were in caves at the time forward. And I think that it's a human response to have a transformational expectation to go into a dark room, let's say in a theater, and want that communal experience. And so, from documentarians like Laura Poitras or Raoul Peck, who we're working with now on his Orwell project, and a great group of other financiers and producers, to Ben Stiller, who's if I remember correctly, is a Goodwill Ambassador for the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, or literally Aquaman, Jason Momoa, caring about life underwater. And I think there's just a really huge representation of directors, writers, actors who care about this and want to have that tuning fork in the piece of content that they're making kind of move people. And that is wrapped up in that.
You mentioned this sort of value add, because I think this is very unique with Participant from where I see it, that if you're working on a project, let's say you've developed it, maybe you've co-financed it or produced it, and then let's say you're going to take it to a streamer. But you're coming not just with the piece of content, but with the knowledge of how to maybe have an impact with that or help with the marketing of that. Can you put a dollar value on that? Is it something it's 10% of your budget of the project you're putting on the impact work, or it's not quite so straightforward as that?
It's sort of like we build the work organically, right? And that team that I mentioned, what they do is, all along the chain of creation of a piece of any kind of content, any kind of film. Let's just use the word film here as a proxy for everything. At the later end, we can, because in the beginning, when we start working with artists, we sort of do research and we dig into the culture and see what is the story here? What are they trying to say? First of all, how can we give them resources to, kind of be safe if they're exploring something, really tough in the culture where a lot of people might be really vocal about something, let's just say, for instance. And, we have partner organizations and expertise in our own teams that we've built over 18 years, people with government experience, NGO experience, massive climate experience, massive social racial justice experience, and teams in the company outside that we work with. So we can provide, first of all, that flywheel and that support to the artists as they're developing. And then in that work, we start to see, hey, this organization really could use this story to, kind of retell history about Fred Hampton, who was profiled by the FBI as a terrorist, but really was a community organizer, kind of trying to, create more power in the Black community. And we can understand how they want to use the film, and then we can put a budget around that, and we can raise money around that if we need to. And in the case of something like Roma, we had a 2-year campaign. We sort of call that our fourth act of the story.
Okay.
Right? So it's embedded in the early work, and in the later work, we can take a film like Roma and in the United States start to change laws and work with the National Domestic Workers Alliance and IGNPU to really bring visibility to domestic workers and kind of create more kind of support for them in their livelihoods. And in Mexico, change laws as well, because there was really no Social Security or anything like that around domestic work, and that costs money. And so the side of the business that brings those resources, is something that we then budget along the way, and then other organizations have funders, and someone will say, I'll do that. Here's,
because this is something we care about as well.
But the distribution partners, really support us because we've worked with them time over time. And so, Just Mercy was a huge campaign. We worked with one community in Macro and on that. And, something like Descendant, which we did with Netflix, we have the ability for them to focus some of their resources and create capacity for our work and really design the work with us, in a way where it's going to inure to the audience, right? So, yes, it's back to my off-balance sheet marketing story, but yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think it really does. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the overview of the media ecosystem right now, because I know you're looking at the theatrical side, the streaming side. Sort of, can we take a step back or up? To see, how you're seeing the macro of the media landscape right now.
Yeah, sure. I think everyone's reading headlines about this, right? And I think how it's affecting our business at large there's a lot of, tough stuff that we've been dealing with for a couple of years, right? Obvious reasons, the pandemic, but I think macroeconomic environment is what it is. Interest rates, costs, people focusing, every equity investor to every platform or group of companies funded by equities looking for profitability. So that creates a lot of pressure. But I see a lot of positive tea leaves in this. So if we just take the assumptions for a moment that the macroeconomic environment is tough, that the theatrical space at large was obviously deeply affected by the pandemic and changed a lot of windows, and it's not really uniform, but Europe has always known how to value these downstream windows, and they've been smarter than I think a lot of us in the States, where now they're sort of rebalancing and resettling, and we know how to value them a little bit more. But the streamer correction is an obvious one, right? And I think, if you read all the financial papers, the streamer corrections were really in 22 and throughout the rest of this year. And you'll see kind of single-digit year-over-year growth, 24 and forward at the streamers, and they have to spend on content, right? So the streamer correction feels like it's sort of quasi-over. I've spoken to some streamers here, and they're like, we're spending, but they're spending really more wisely, right? And I think that, but behind that, there's a lot of really interesting things that I see in the patterns I look for, right? So in addition to sort of the streamer correction, there's been an even kind of more sort of foundational digital correction at large, right? The digital space, Facebook, social media, has sort of reached its peak. A lot of those, I was listening to Matt Bellany talk on his podcast. If you don't listen to it, it's really fascinating, called The Town. And he had an author on that was, who wrote a book called Traffic. And they were talking about, the entire digital space isn't about traffic anymore. It's really about a one-to-one connection with an audience, right? And that's what every person in this room is looking for in making their piece of content. And I think there's great curation and connectivity to audience that's kind of becoming the main value, where traffic has been the main value prior in the digital space. So I think that's really encouraging. It's like, they likened it in their podcast to the bars that you kind of don't want to go to anymore. So it's like these new ways and these new curated platforms. And, one I love in the film space is Letterboxd. Any of you that aren't on Letterboxd, download the app today because it's sort of like a cinephile. I got a lot of nods, right? Especially the young people out there. It's like 16-year-olds on Letterboxd. It's like their homepage for movies. But, the thing that's also there is that it's weird. So advertising is back. Right. So, all of the streamers have an ad product now and they're selling ads against it. And a couple of days ago at the upfronts in the United States, Netflix spoke publicly about the ad product that they have been sampling on a small subscriber portion of their subscriber base. And the average revenue per user in their ad product is higher than their subscriber product. And that's on a small set of their audience. But it kind of portends this revenue that's coming into streamers, right? So let's just pause there, but
keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind. And then you have syndication. I call it syndication is back. It's not syndication like Seinfeld's on another channel in that way, but a lot of the streamers are selling their library of originals to other platforms or to platforms within their own ecosystem, generating revenue that's traveling through waterfalls, maybe, I hope, someday. So, I think that this all portends that there has to be, in the buyout moment we've been in for quite some time, it portends that there has to sort of be a passing through of value in the increase of revenue at the platforms. And I think obviously in theatrical and especially in Europe, we've always known, in France, they're the best at it. We know the pay is worth this if it's at this time. Now the windows have rebalanced, but I sort of think that portends for more sharing of revenue off balance, or off later windows of revenue, I hope, and more information, hopefully.
Okay, so this could be really good for sort of independent film world who tends to gather in Cannes, right? A sort of balance.
Independent film world. Yes. That's me too.
Okay, yes, I know. And where do you see, we're talking about value, but can we drill it down into sort of, especially independent film? I know you do more than just independent film. Where do we see financing models evolving, or just financing plans you're seeing right now, or have they been starting to sort of reset?
Well, it depends on what you mean by starting to reset.
Yeah.
Right? I think, it's a big paradigm shift for the financing model. And I think, all the good sellers and producers and studios and companies in Cannes, you kind of have to look at every project you're doing kind of in two ways, right? You have to look at it. If I sell it to a streamer, this is kind of my expectation. And if I can bring partners in territories together, this is sort of what I...
The old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned and still good-fashioned way, right?
Okay.
And so, what that does is it changes the time that you need to spend in trying to build your deals and toe dipping and things like that to the market. But that paradigm shift is significant. And I think if you add the cost pressures on budgets post-pandemic in general, then, we're all struggling with this really does cost this to make it well at the expectation of the market. But I have to sort of think about it with this toggle in mind, right? And so, how that eventually works is a challenge. But I see, there was an announcement yesterday that this film with Jodie Comer that Anton had been working on that UTA was sold to Paramount in a multi-million-dollar deal, and it wasn't in the market last year, but there were conversations around that project last year because you just have to sort of be doing that. You have to sort of be talking to the market early and often, and still be able to back into how to support your project financially with financial resources to get it made. And everyone's coming here trying to get their films made. So, the financing toggle of those two realities, I hope starts to merge again. And I think the return of equity investors really knowing how to value that, having had that be the way it is for a while, I think is the smarts are there. I mean, the creativity, vision, and expertise and smarts of people walking the Croisette is massive. And I always put it in the power of them to sort of cross this river and get things done. So.
Yeah. I like that positivity of getting things done. But can I ask what worries you about the health of the independent film sector? And some might be obvious. post-pandemic audiences in cinemas, or what's sort of worrying you about independent film?
sector?
Yes. Big question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It is. No, that's okay. I think it's the lack of a commercial recognition for the audience for those movies, right? It worries me. I think if you look at the overperformance in the past 10 years of like breakout indie hits, right? Like Moonlight or La La Land or obviously Everything Everywhere All at Once and things like that. Like they're overperforming and they have these long lives and they're just, globally huge behemoths in the end of the day. And that's a sign that the audience is underserved, right? So I think there's more commercial value in that audience that is being recognized. Okay. And I think there's more reliance on,
round of applause over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And you can find, like, back to my one-to-one connection, it's not that hard. It's not rocket science. It's work. Mm-hmm. You can find that audience, but it's work. And so there's this reliance on this sort of known IP, right? Which, yes, Marvel, we have to have Marvel and we have to have DC and we have to have IP like that. But I think, remaking films and again and again and again and relying on that flight to quality in a tough economic time, I understand. Known IP, I understand. We must have it. But this other piece of it is, she agrees, incredibly valuable audience. And again, like back to Fireside, right? Fireside and Caves, like this is why we gather. We need this in our culture. And so I think it's really time for all the companies, and I obviously think much about the U.S., but I think globally, the power of the super indies that are coming together to sort of create a flytrap for independent producers to kind of share infrastructure and support them is an antidote to this, and getting these projects to market so that maybe the distributors and the platforms need to see them later, so they're more risk averse. But I think that audience is there, and I think we all believe in it, right? So
those super indies, is that people like Newen or Federation, Studio Canal?
Newen, Federation, Fifth Season, okay. My former employer as a number of content. Like, I think, there are multiple examples of this. Fremantle's a big one, and they're really supporting their artists. Like all of these companies are there to say, documentary producer, here's money for development, we'll help you with this. And, you create this sort of shared infrastructure and shared information base. Like it's a slipstream of information and its power. Even when I was at agency, that slipstream makes you extremely smart. It gives you an edge. So, I think that's, and there's a doubling down. I think these companies are able to really back incredible IP that's coming from some visionary, and they feel they have that lift in their belief to get it done. And that's what we do in negotiations, right? If they're like, that person doesn't believe in it, if they feel they have that support, right? Look at the artists that these companies have gathered, right? I spoke recently with Fremantle, and it's like these incredible filmmakers and producers, creative producers. And so, in multiple countries, right? So I think that, am I answering your question?
Yes.
Am I going down my rabbit hole?
No, you're answering it.
Yeah.
And did I make
no, go ahead.
There? Okay.
This
I want to, that sort of lift you get when you hear the right project. We've talked about participant, but we haven't really talked about anything specific. So
our projects.
Yeah. What are your projects that are giving you that lift to go the extra mile with them, that sort of represent what is exciting at participant right now?
Yeah, so a little bit of sort of right now, and then something more recent, maybe, and maybe both on the content side and the impact side, just so we can kind of share all of this resonance stuff that I think is important as well. So films we have kind of quote coming out right now, and this is also a great way to understand our business model. We have 2 theatrical Ko-Fi distribution projects coming to the market in the next 6 to 10 months, let's call it. One is a film we co-financed with Lionsgate. So they have it internationally called White Bird, which has Helen Mirren. And it's in the Wonder universe. So Wonder, everyone knows.
Wonder with Julia Roberts?
Yes,
Wonder?
Yes. So the bully's grandmother is Helen Mirren, and she survived the Holocaust. And so it's based on the sequel, but it's a story of really kindness and against hate. And so, that's a big production for us. Mark Forrester directing, that comes out in August, and maybe pushing a little bit. We'll see. Not sure. We also have a co-fi with A24 around a very, very visionary artist named Khalil Joseph, who is a fine artist who has multiple installations and kind of visionary work that he's done under the label of Black News. And so we and A24 supported his feature film. And what Black News is it's sort of a telling of the contemporary news through the Black lens, right? And what the film does is it goes back in a little bit to how we got here in history and tells it through the Black lens, so things we know. And he's just, an absolute visionary. And so, we like the commercial end of the spectrum and the visionary end of the spectrum. I think Ko-Fi, those two deals. We have 2 streamer deals that'll be coming out in the next year. We made the Shirley Chisholm biopic with Regina and Raina King producing, Regina playing Shirley Chisholm, John Ridley directing, and that's with Netflix. And we have
Will that get a theatrical, or is that
unclear? The movie's being finished.
Okay.
They do have a theatrical person on staff there, so I think for an awards campaign, I think most definitely, and what the size of it will be, we just don't know yet. And then we have a big YA piece of IP, best-selling book called Out of My Mind with Disney Plus, that is sort of in that wonder world. But I think and we have a documentary we announced recently, the Orwell doc that Raoul Peck is making. Courtney Sexton, rejoined participant after a 10-year hiatus at CNN Films, was with Diane and Davis in the early days of participant, and so her being back is a real boon to just growing our docs slate. And on the impact side, and then what I should say before I do that is we announced on Monday something really exciting, Prima Facie, which if anyone's been in London or New York recently knows probably the stage version of this, written by Susie Miller, that launched originally in Australia, a story of a defense attorney or barrister in London, now in the London version, went to the West End and now on stage in New York presently with 4 Tony nominations, Jodie Comer in a one-woman show, playing a barrister or defense attorney who has a lot of clients that are accused of sexual assault. And she is very successful, this hotshot attorney who kind of came from a working class background, defending these individuals, and in a relationship with a colleague that's sort of casual, that turns non-consensual, the script is flipped and she's on the other side, and suddenly realizing that the law does not really deliver justice based on the lines of consent. So we're making that film in London in the fall. Susanna White is directing, and Cynthia Erivo is going to play the main role. We've blown out the one-woman play, so the characters will all be on screen. Really, really exciting. And the impact work, I'll just say really briefly, I think it goes back to that one-to-one connection. We have a documentary we released with Netflix again that broke at Sundance 2 Sundances ago, I should say, called Descendant. And we're doing, the impact campaign is going really, really viral. The Inflation Reduction Act is providing a lot of funding for environmental justice. And this one community who were basically descended of the last slaves to arrive in the United States illegally in 1859, are a community today that knows their heritage. They know where in Africa they came from. They've passed their tradition and story down for generations. And the ship that they came on had been missing forever and was found. And so it's this incredible story, undeniable when you see it. And now all this sort of justice is hopefully over the long term, near term, coming to this community. We had a documentary that Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power, made by Sam Pollard and Geeta Gambhir, that we had this just incredible overperformance of these TikTok videos that we worked with this artist on TikTok, Garrison, that did like a micro Black history around Stokely Carmichael and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that were really trying to get the Black vote in Alabama after Martin Luther King had passed. And, millions and millions of views on TikTok, book clubs on TikTok, like really incredible audiences kind of galvanizing around that. So, that's sort of a smattering of the latest. Yeah.
I knew this was going to happen, that I have about 25 more questions. But I'm going to try to start to wrap up by asking you, these are your people. These are your independent film world right here. Where do you see this world going? Any sort of call to arms for your comrades here? What's sort of really on your mind about this world?
Okay. Well, I'll try not to sound too kumbaya in this, right? But I am hopeful.
We're on a beach.
I know, it's true. We're on a beach. This is a safe space, right? So last time I did a call to arms for the business in a speech, I got in a little bit of trouble. Thank you for the 4 of you that know what I'm talking about, laughing along with me.
On YouTube. Yeah.
It's on YouTube, 2009. No, I was in Toronto and I gave a speech then, and I talked a lot about the value of data, and I think there's good news there. And that moment, I think, has not entirely passed, but there's a lot more data available in the streaming world. Netflix shares its hours viewed and some of their top titles, a lot of their titles. The streaming platforms are starting to share more demographic data to the content owners. They can't really share a lot. There's no uniform, hey, I think we all deserve to know, if we were involved with a film, how it did, right? That's how things have worked for millennia in the millennia of the film space. Anyway.
Should we get a round of applause for
yes,
that?
Let's do that. We should, and we're starting to, and that's great. And I think, the most mature platforms kind of tell you a little bit more. And I think the newer ones, they haven't grown to the audience size. It's understandable. They can't really tell you too much, and that's okay. We partner with distributors. We're there to create audience. So, we get, some anecdotal information. It's really hard. There's no uniform, though, way of doing that. But so that doesn't really worry me anymore, because I think with advertising and syndication and all that coming, like I said, the advertising model is to know the ratings. The advertisers need to know how things did for their spends. And I'll draft off of advertisers any day in that space, right? So let's move the data question to the left. I think it's about, this is going to sound very participant, but I think it's about fairness. I think it's about valuing contributions. And, as previously mentioned, the indie space and the paradigm shifts have put really powerful producers and companies with financing, creative producers, every type of maker of things. The writer's strike is about this. It's put them in this moment where the paradigm doesn't really value, the work, right? The future of work is in this. And the people that are getting things made, the financial pressures are, need to create a sustainable model for everyone to sort of participate. Jeff Sagansky gave a speech a year ago, who was a former CBS executive, is now, an advisor and producer and executive, that, it was the dark age of profit sharing, right? And that's I'm not attributing that to me. We talk a lot about contribution and attribution in participant, because we're in our social change work, we're trying to contribute to the conversation, and everybody has something to contribute, the people that make things and the audience. And I think that rebalancing has to happen a little bit. I think deals take longer, as I previously mentioned. And it's because the creative producers and this independent studios globally that are making things, they know the value of their work, and they're fighting harder, and it takes longer to get good deals, right? Because the deals shifted, the deal boilerplates shifted away from valuing that entirely a little too much. And so what I'll say is maybe there's more non-citable, I didn't put that on the microphone.
Okay.
Deals, more deals that are like, okay, I'll change how I'm normally doing things because you're right. There's more of that happening.
Okay.
But I think the valuing of the contribution to these big businesses,
yeah,
right? In the producerial and creative work that everyone in this room is doing, I think I need that great rebalancing to shift a little more. And I'm sort of Ted Lasso on it. I'll put my Believe poster over my door when I walk in and out of the office. But I do think that's my call to arms: fairness and valuing contribution.
I think that is just the perfect call to arms, and we're going to. I do want to know more, but we'll meet on a Sun Lounger
to a lot of other great
tomorrow.
Here, so, yeah.
Thank you so much, Liesl. That
Sure.
was some guiding lights for us.
I hope so.
It really was. And
Thank you, everyone, for having me.
A round of applause. Okay. So everybody, unless you're coming on stage, stay where you're seated, because we have more fun ahead. Mike Goodridge is going to have to be called to the stage. I'm going to call up our next panelists. I just singled Mike out because I could see him out of the corner of my eye already. They're all here. How wonderful. So this next, please start coming up. It'll be less awkward. You don't even need your umbrella anymore.
Well,
Hello. Well, we'll see. Hello. So, yes, we're coming straight into our panel discussion.
Yes.
And this is looking at, we've called it Navigating Film Finance in a Changing World. And I think it's going to cover lots of areas, not just, is this deal worth 10% or 20%? We're going to get into some more big picture discussion, I think, as well. I'll introduce the panel. We have Mike Goodridge of the UK's Good Chaos, expertly opening the water whilst holding the microphone. He's done this before. So he was a co-producer of last year's Palme d'Or winner Triangle of Sadness, and this year is a producer of Jessica Hausner's Club Zero, which premieres tonight, Mike? Tomorrow night. So that's why Mike has time for us today. So we're really glad he's joined us. We have Rikke Innes, who is CEO of Reinvent Studios, based in Denmark, working across production and sales. And yes, many people will know you from your former years at Trust and Trust Nordisk. Yes, knows a lot of different sectors of the business. We have Elisa Alvarez, who is here in her capacity as advisor to IPR.VC, which is an investment firm with teams in Helsinki and London, strategic partners in the US. Don't worry if you don't know what Elisa does quite yet. She's going to tell us more, and you'll be really glad. She's a true finance expert. And we have Emily Georges, who is co-founder and producer at Paradise City, which is based in Paris and London. Some of her past credits include Call Me By Your Name and The True History of the Kelly Gang. Elisa, because some people are going to be confused, like, what were those letters you just said, IPR.VC? Can you tell us a little bit about what that fund is? Explain it maybe in more common terms of what you actually do.
So, well, I'm a financier, and that's what I've been doing for more years than I care to count. And certainly focused on the entertainment sector for 20 years. And I advise capital. I've always been on the side of the money, if you wish, with banks, with funds, and now I advise funds such as IPR. And the letters stand for intellectual property rights. And this is a group of financiers out of Finland that got together 8 years ago to use their expertise from venture capital and apply it to the world of entertainment, having done it in many other sectors before. And cut to now, they have very successfully invested in film and TV primarily, but also in other subsectors with 2 different funds. So subsequently, they are now about to start operating their 3rd fund. And what that means is that they have been very good at investing, so much so that their investors continue to back them. So, and the strategy, certainly in the last, 3-4 years since I have been advising IPR, has been to focus on long-term relationships with what we call commercial operators or strategic partners. So these are companies that are typically able to not only produce film and TV, but also sell internationally or distribute in some territories. And in doing that, we've created relationships, which you may call slate deals, if you wish, with the likes of XYZ Films and A24 and a few others. And we are here because we believe in the sector and see that it continues to develop.
Yeah. Thank you. I think a lot of people perked up when you said A24, so now we know. How would you see, if I'm a private investor, which I'm not, maybe real estate has been a great investment traditionally. Film is quite a risky investment. I mean, how do you think people are seeing film and media investments right now? I know it's probably still quite risky, but are they attractive enough to keep this sector healthy?
Now, this is a really good question, and I think we need to start by making a distinction.
Oh, is that? Can you hold the mic a little closer, or did it cut out?
Hello? Yeah.
There we go.
The distinction between private investor and institutional investor, right? So, very importantly, IPR doesn't, and I certainly would find it very frightening to represent private investors as in individuals. You know, my mom should never invest in films. So she invested in my education, that's risky enough. But rather, we are talking about institutional investors. What does that mean? These are very large institutions, pension funds, funds of funds, insurance companies that have the remit to invest large sums of money and generate substantial returns. So for them, the investment into film, TV, entertainment in general is about diversification. And yes, they will have probably vast amounts of their portfolios invested in real estate, more traditional areas, and that should be, this is the right thing to do. But to increase the potential returns, they need something else in their portfolio that inevitably will be riskier than, you know, the usual more traditional sectors of the industry. And that's where entertainment comes in.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you a little bit later with some sort of overviews of what you're seeing. I want to come to some of our producers next. Emily, I'd like to start with you. Just how are you seeing, what are the sort of challenges of being, could go on for hours, what are the challenges of being an independent producer? My God, we'll be here for days. But right now, what are the challenges of packaging or financing? What are some of the spots that are tricky for you?
Well, hello. Everything is tricky from day one till the end of the process, right? I come, just like you, from an international sales background. I've been close enough to talents to know how to entertain their voice, grow the voice, reach to this level of project that they've been caring for. And I think the challenge is really to sustain the growth of this creative vision of directors and talents. And it's been more and more challenging because in Europe we used to have solid public funds that are getting smaller and smaller. So you definitely need to combine now the systems to go for partnering with others that sustain the vision of these directors. So the number one point right now that I feel is of essence is really to find the right partners. The right partners, number one. Yeah.
And I know you're not just working in France. We mentioned Paradise City is also London-based. You're working across Europe. But the French system has been the envy of the world because there was a lot of money, and a lot of public money. Is it still booming on the sort of public money? I mean, the investment levels look healthy from the outside, but what would you say about the French system right now?
I don't use a lot the French system because I work with talents from all over the world, and the French system is actually probably one of the worst systems to support foreign language projects. Okay. Yes.
It's very different if you're in France working with French language.
Yes. It's very different. You have a roof in France that you don't have in other territories, for instance, Germany. It's still good, right? Yeah. You can still get pre-sales for talents like the Palme d'Or winner, where you still have the, paid television and public television getting on board, but they do it probably for 4 projects a year, so that doesn't really sustain a system. Yeah. So, for instance, Luca Guadagnino on Call Me by Your Name, we had no French money at all on it.
But were you based in France at the time?
I've always been based in France. Yeah. Being
so that didn't matter.
That didn't matter at all. It was. It's a project that combines system, and especially when it comes to English language projects, which is one of our specialty, because we have a very close relationship with the US, and I've produced in the US, and I continue to produce in the US, shooting a film June 5th in the US.
Oh.
Yes, the money for this profile of films in France is very, very hard to collect.
Okay. We'll come back and talk about some of the more non-French. Mike, on the end there.
Hello, Wendy.
Hello. Is based in the UK, but working very internationally. You've been shooting in Japan and Iceland. Had an Austrian director working in the UK. You were here last year with Triangle, which was so many countries I stopped counting. How are you seeing the piecing together and where these funding pockets can sit together and then where they fall apart when you try to put them together?
I tailor each thing to each director, really. I mean, it's obvious when you're working with a prestigious director whose films premiere in film festivals that you can sort of put together a co-production around Europe, and that's what I'm doing actually with a couple of films here. But then there are other films. I've had a couple of films which, one was a great director but no cast, zero international cast, and one was a Finnish action movie, Sisu.
Oh, we love Sisu.
With no cast either, and that's the challenge when you look at the independent market, the sales market that we see here, because they need cast. And of course, as a producer, even a producer in the UK with English agents, it's really tough to get cast these days. There's so much competition for these.
And is
actors.
it because are they tied up in episodic work? Is it just
possibly,
money also?
Possibly episodic, stage.
Yeah.
One agent said to me recently, you don't know the volume of things that are coming at these guys. It's massive volume. And they tend to go with the great director or the big money job, and it's very hard to get their attention. So cast is a problem, but it was interesting on these two films, Sisu, and the other film is called Touch, where you have to take that punt and you have to go to the one-stop shops and see if they're going to back you, which luckily in these instances we did Sisu with Sony and Touch with Focus Features.
And, we used to think of the UK as, especially with the English language in Europe, obviously a hotbed, but also sort of a financial hotbed of Europe. How are you finding producing out of the UK? Has Brexit, reared its head for your work? The UK is obviously not in Eurimage. Does that hinder certain things?
It was in Eurimage, I think, for 2 years in the 1980s. I think that was the last time it was in Eurimage.
The UK's glory years, yes.
To be honest, the UK was never particularly interested in working in the EU as far as I could see, when I wasn't a producer. And now I am. They're all saying, I wish we could work in the EU. And it's like, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's a bit sad, really. It's sad for me. I don't consider myself as non-European. I'm an absolute European, and it's really hard psychologically more than anything else, because you do get a bit of resistance from the Europeans. Having said that, the Anglo world, of which the UK is a kind of bridge and a kind of a significant part, amazing talent in the UK, amazing IP. That is the nub of the UK. I think that's the strength, and. A lot of Europeans want to work in the UK. Triangle last year, I see Yorgos over there. Triangle was, Ruben Östlund's first feature in English. Club Zero is not Jessica's first, but it's, we shot 31 days in the UK. It's there is a desire to work in the English language, and the UK can help with that.
It's sort of the English language without selling your soul to Hollywood, perhaps. Not that you have to, we have to put it in those dramatic terms, but it can be a nice bridge between doing local language and...
Yes, I think so. Yes, I do look at the way the platforms have changed our approach to international content in non-English language. I think Squid Game is probably Netflix's biggest ever show, right? But
They won't tell us, really.
but
will
that,
they?
that's
Yes.
in Korean, and I
Yeah.
think we have to say that the world is opening out a little bit. I mean, Lupin. All these shows that are not in English are some of the biggest shows on television. So that to me is very exciting.
Yeah.
And then there's an example I always have, which is my favorite show, the French show, the Bureau, Le Bureau de Légende, which is obviously a French language show with amazing French talent. But a lot of that show was in English because it was French people overseas talking to Russians or Iranians or Tunisians in English.
Yeah.
And I think you are looking at a new dawn of entertainment where we're not so hung up on non-English language.
Okay. Mike, we know your real favorite show is Emily in Paris, so
I've never
But
watched
if
Emily
you-
in Paris, but
if you want to pretend this very international show is fine. Ricky, I would love to come to you, because you're working across sort of packaging things up, production, development, selling it, obviously is a huge part of what reInvent does. Where are you seeing some bright spots and excitement?
Well, we do mainly Nordic content, so TV series and feature films. And what I absolutely like about this business in general is that if there is a downside and a depression, inflation like right now, people find new ways of collaborating. And that's why flexibility and partnership is something that we see. So that's my sweet spot right now, is trying just to really find new ways. You could say what works for us right now. Unfortunately, we don't have a Ruben Östlund. We would have loved to have that. But we do have a lot of talent in the Nordics. And whenever the talent is not making a film, that is more expensive because it's not getting funded, they do smaller films. And they just do it themselves with their, closest friends, and they find private equity sometimes, and that's where you guys come in sometimes. So I think genre films is something that works for us. In our slate now, we have quite a few that are not high budget, but they're quite clever and very contained environment. And as long as the characters work and it's a little bit more high concept, it works for us. That's selling well. Disaster films, amazing, like The Wave coming out of the Nordics is something that is really working well. And then action movies works well as well. So if you don't have a Cannes contender or a Berlin Darling or a bigger festival title, then that works for us as well.
Okay.
And then animation.
Okay, animation. For adults or kids, both?
Family. Audiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we should say you're selling the new Lucas Moodysson, which is Lucas Moodysson is going back to 99 with Together 99. So what about episodic? Because you've done a lot, or you were moving into a lot of episodic as well. How much of what you're doing is independent feature film? How much is episodic? And does that help to keep a balance between both?
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole idea of funding our company would be to have one step in each camp, so that we are less fragile. We represent right now SF Studios, and they have a wonderful catalog of plus 1,000 titles. And then we have 12 to 15 titles, feature films a year. Most of those are SF titles, but we also pick up a few great titles ourselves. And then we pick up 10 to 12 really big Nordic drama series a year, mainly from public service, but it can also be like TV4, TV2. And if you look at the business case, at least for the ones we've had, then it's definitely the drama series that's been driving our business. Because when you sell TV series, it's for a longer period of time. So it doesn't get old that fast. Where a feature film, you have a moment where it has it peaks and then it just goes down. So then you really need to act fast. But you can't hype a TV series quite in the same way as you can with a feature film. So
Also because it's so territorial, or unless it's a Netflix launch globally on day and date,
Yeah, well, it's more like what you can create here in Cannes, which is obviously feature film based, is very unique. You have buyers wanting to buy right now in this specific moment. TV series buyers, it's different. They have the time, Let's talk 3-4 months from now. at MIPCOM or another TV market. So you can't really pressure the project as much to create quite the same hype.
Okay.
But it's a steady flow of income, no doubt about it,
Okay.
the drama series.
Good. And Elisa, with IPR.VC, are they also investing in episodic slates in companies that work with episodic? Or, yeah, how do you sort of see what's hot for people to invest in?
Yeah, well,
Which companies or
yes, well,
project by project.
so first of all, two questions there, right? So first, film versus TV. Look, the motivation is to work with the best possible people. So that is the VC kind of DNA that IPR brings to the table. Work with the best companies. Work with quality projects, be it film or TV. They are out to finance intellectual property in entertainment. But beyond that, we have to look at returns, right? Because the investors, as we talked about at the beginning, they are looking to diversify their risk and improve their overall returns. So in my experience, it has been, certainly in the last 5 years, from the provision of equity, a lot harder to generate returns from series than from films.
Okay.
And
We always hear that TV's where the money is. But
TV is where the money is for the producers, for talent, hopefully for sales as well.
not for the
No, because the best deals, and this is all changing now, so, we are coming to the end of a cycle and there's a new one starting, and I'm hoping that we will be able to serve the new wave and serve those who need capital as well. But the large TV series, they have been broadly financed by the streamers. And there's no space for private fund because, as Emily said, there's no back end.
Yeah.
So the private equity is about taking a risk for a certain return with a potential upside, in it, which is basically net profits, right, in perpetuity.
Emily, are you looking at doing series as well? Yeah.
We do, but they're all same as the film sector, very director-driven, which, by the way, is very difficult right now, as I think the trend is to do local, cheap, quick, and not international,
Not like a big auteur international.
Absolutely,
series.
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
no. The market is very disrupted in
Yeah.
terms of TV series development right now and TV series production. And yes, the shift is not over, and it's a question of cycle, as you say. I mean, I think we just have to stay tight and ready with amazing, visionary content for TV series with these great creators, and wait for better period. But right now, streamers are not investing in this profile of series. Local televisions don't have the means, so you can set independent TV series with multiple channel and multiple territories, and that's where maybe I think a cycle of investment is going to
Come
be
back.
again,
Yeah.
yes, efficient and meaningful in
offering a return on investment.
Yes,
Yeah. No, exactly. So I
yes.
think this is like really important time right now where, this kind of commercially, the roles are being redefined, and it looks as though there will now start to, opportunities with real potential upside should start coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think our the ethos and certainly the mindset has been collaboration. So it's collaborating with content creators via the relationships with the studios or distributors.
And I would love to hear just each of you talking about how you see the streamers impacting the ecosystem and impacting what independents are trying to do, and are there some upsides to that? Obviously, if you get the big Netflix deal, it is an upside to that. But, how do we see this landscape right now? And do we think that we're going to have more contraction of what the streamers are doing? Mike, can I ask you first?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a point. Certainly, when I was also in international sales of films, and certainly when I left that job, I felt the streamers were going to kill the business, and that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
I got it wrong. And I think the streamers need international sales agents, they need producers, and they've realized that. And that sort of massive wave of money that came into the business in the mid-teens, it's kind of slowed down a bit. The streamers are retrenching. We all know the troubles that they're going through on a corporate level and a subscription level. So at the same time, they haven't replaced the independent film arena, So on the one hand, I'm excited because I think independent film is still the home of creative invention and the greatest voices, and will be the discoverers of all the talent that TV will take later. But we have to get those made, and I think it's harder now to get independent films made. I really do. I think it's just
I agree.
Really tough, and that's just, hopefully that's just a time that we're in, but it's really difficult. I mean,
But do you see that getting better soon? Do you think Netflix is going to stop overspending on certain things?
Well, I think I actually think it's about people going back to cinemas.
Okay.
I think France is getting back to normal. I think the UK, for example, where I'm from, is still not back to normal after COVID. On the contrary, for a certain type of independent film. And I've heard other territories are really struggling. So, that's what's driven cinema all through the last century,
I wouldn't say, sorry, just one thing. I wouldn't say France is back to normal. I think it is a few projects that get it all, right?
Yeah.
So it's, it is shrinking for sure.
Yeah.
The success for independent directors is really shrinking.
I mean, the windows are so small these days, aren't they? I mean, Sisu, for example, Lionsgate released in the US, and we had 18 days in cinemas, and it's still in cinemas, but it went on to TVOD after 18 days.
Okay. But it was the widest ever release of a Nordic film.
I think so.
I think it was. I wrote that it is, so let's say it's true.
It must be true.
I didn't fact check that. Yeah.
But the thing about that film is that, it's the theatrical window was the launch pad for the ancillary markets, and that's what cinema is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the trigger in a series of windows that the platforms have kind of assaulted and tried to take away.
Yeah. Can we claw that back?
I think independent films still do.
Still do that. Okay. And Emily, how are you feeling?
I definitely struggling. Closing films until 3 a.m. Is the new norm. It's a very tiring process to find the right partners, and you have to multiply the number of partners. We also see a new way of working with private investors willing to have a more direct contact with creators and filmmakers, new voices. So we're right now, I think, combining on every movie we do, the public system and the private investors coming in to sustain the budget of movies.
How complicated is that, and just in terms of like the waterfall or who's in first and in last, and does it work to combine all that public and private? Yes, you can make it work.
It's so technical.
Okay.
So we need to have people around us. Even if we know how to do it, you need a real team to put that together in an efficient way. And this real team can be in a studio closing major deals, so they have to be very passionate to do independent movies and work with us, right? So it's a very specific profile of people that you need to find. You need the skills that could be used in very technical, high-profile, montage, and you have to give it for this tiny sector of the independent cinema. The level of skill is
exactly equivalent. So
How many lawyers do you have?
Yeah,
Depends on the film.
we have right now, for instance, first-time director U.S. talent within WGS Strike, a co-production between Luca Guadagnino's company and ours. At the beginning, we're all Luca and us WGS signatories. So we cannot sign the chain of title. So we have a lawyer in the US. We have our internal lawyer. We have a lawyer specialized on WGA subjects. We have a lawyer of one of the equity investors. We have a lawyer of the second equity investors. And we had an extra lawyer outside. So
Just for kicks, yeah.
Yeah, so the 3M calls are mainly us with 5-6 lawyers.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to give that example, it is the requirements of skill is super high.
Yeah. And Mike, I know it was something like Triangle. As you mentioned, like we know we've done these European co-pros long enough to kind of know how to structure them. But then that had a piece of US private equity in it, or private investment. How did that sit? You don't have to tell me details, but was that easy enough to include the US in that traditional?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a secret, but
Okay.
the US equity piece was a North American territory buyout.
Okay.
In order for it not to disrupt the lovely pari passu patchwork of European countries. So, so they, Imperative, who were the fund, they handled the US sale themselves, and it was they own the US territory outright in perpetuity.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was specifically done not to mess around with the million other participants.
You always need to invent, right?
Yeah.
Each project has a different. That's also the fun of it, right?
I mean, to me, it was a masterpiece of construction. This
It
budget.
is masterpiece.
Yeah.
We're
But having said that, it was a director who just won the Palme d'Or for his last film. So you can't do it for every film. It's you had an appetite from the public funds around Europe to support him.
I hope I never see those spreadsheets.
Oh,
because
and
they
the
would
legal
keep me
fees.
up at night.
Yeah.
Ricky, from what you're doing right now, how do you see public and private sitting together, and maybe also which territories? I know a few years back you were, talking to China a lot, and it seems like a lot of independents aren't really talking to China in that way now. Could you? That's two questions in one, I guess.
Yes. I just start with the streamer part, actually, because I think that's interesting. Basically, we see that the streamers are not fully financing anymore. That's a possibility for a sales agent, obviously, because there is a gap. So we are, very excited about the opportunities. The problem is that the gap is too big.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, when we have a project presented and we're like, would love to have this, and it's like 50 to 60% financed, I mean, we're not going to be able to close that gap, even with a little bit of tax rebate here and there. So I think either one needs to again find partnerships that possible streamers versus broadcasters with a sales agent start working together. And that's happening right now.
That's good that that's happening,
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And I see there is an appetite for co-production even in countries and between in the Nordic countries, what do we do when we have less money? We just need to find them somehow. And we need to be less insistent on, I guess, our exclusive windowing. So I think everything that is happening now is that it's up in the air. Everything is being redefined. The windowing, the payment, the territories, it's super interesting. So if you have an open mind and is positive, then I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. But of course...
Can I just add something there? The streamers, of course, have driven up the crew rates and the cast rates in every country.
Problem.
Absolutely.
So the budget...
Denmark fell apart for a year,
Totally, and that's my next thing, because, I mean, what do you do if you... I mean... The ambitions are there. Everybody wants great projects, but the budgets, I mean, they cannot be as big.
They're untenable, I think,
It's untenable.
And the question is AI going to help us there? I doubt it. Perhaps with research, but we're not gonna. We still need
but
great
there's
people.
things are technology, not
Yeah.
AI as
Exactly.
as in replacing the brains, but where technology can aid a lot in terms of the different types of studios that we can shoot in a much more
Absolutely.
efficient way.
Yeah.
And those things are really important.
Yeah.
We need to embrace all of that.
I agree.
Because the budgets are ridiculous. I
Yeah.
agree, and I'm sorry to offend everyone, but I'm sure I will right now. But as a financier, you look at it. Okay, well, there's a price to make it, and there's a price to sell. If the two don't make sense, you shouldn't be making it.
No.
Similarly, just again to polemize a bit because we need a discussion, right?
Yeah.
What is the point of entertainment if not to cater for your audiences? I think we need to go back to the basics. And, there's been the bonanza time with the streamers, and fantastic for all the producers and talent, everyone that kind of benefited from it. But now let's be real and let's look at what's the point of this particular IP. Who is it going to go for? And what is the audience?
Yeah.
And where is this audience? Because the audience is not in the theaters anymore.
No.
The audience is in many other places. And I think we now need to kind of embrace not the future, but the present.
Absolutely.
Right? And just be more realistic in our expectations.
Yeah. But in order to know the audience,
Good. Stir it up.
yeah,
Yeah.
in order to know the audience, you need knowledge and you need transparency. And I like what Liesl said just beforehand. This transparency and data that is key to know our audience and be relevant. I mean, otherwise we cannot make it. And I think we can be creative with the budgets.
Yeah.
If we know the audience, because as long as you know it before you start creating something and writing a script, and as long as the talent is in on it, let's try new stuff out,
Yeah.
And of course, then you have the big flagships that needs to cost. That's how it is. And of course, with the green environment and everything, then we also need to take care of certain issues there.
Sure. Are you still looking at China?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
That was China.
So more. So
well,
much more.
to be honest, China was a big part of my life for quite some years, and I was collaborating with some great Chinese companies on a Hans Christian Andersen project that had great perspectives. It got financed, actually, how much was that? 30% coming out of Denmark, which was quite amazing, and 40% out of China. It was signed, ready to go, and then nothing happened. I just have to say it for various reasons. So I have to say I was pretty sad for a while, and just kind of like tried to look inside myself, what could have done better and anything. But I think there is a market out there in China still. Of course, the post pandemic. Well, the pandemic itself has not been easy. China has been closing down for 3 years. So I think it's opening up now, new opportunities. But I think from what I hear, not working that much with China anymore, is that China is curious to see what's going on in Europe. And especially, getting to know the tax rebate system, collaborations with European partners, and also exporting their Chinese content. So I think, China is here to stay, and they are looking for partners too, and they have a huge audience, and they have a lot of money, so it's not a bad combo.
Yes.
Are they buying here?
No, honestly,
No.
no,
No.
they're not.
But we no. No, I
At
think
least
the
not from us.
quota issues and censorship are massive and so difficult to navigate, even for local distributor, that it's for them impossible to commit. When they see an opportunity, they would let us know, and so they cannot respond immediately to films that are presented. But we've worked with the Chinese private investment on Anthony Chen's movie that we produced, together with an American investor. So we had a European co-production, French majority, UK minority, Greece, shot in Greece, with majority investment coming out of China, and a good portion coming out of the US. That's feasible. To give some perspective, yes, you can definitely still work with private money coming out of China. You just need the right director, voice, talent attached to it, and that would be meaningful for the Chinese audience. So that's
Elisa.
But, it's just to say, as emerging territories, meaningful ones. Obviously, the Middle East has been around for quite some time, but Saudi Arabia is really emerging as a very interesting place, not only because they do have a lot of capital interested in coming into the space, but there's a whole kind of political initiative going on in terms of opening up entertainment and developing an industry.
Yeah.
So with a lot of investment and the interest in attracting
training
people.
new filmmakers.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you're also very interested in Latin America, or where else do you see either for finding investors or finding investees? Where else is interesting to you around the world?
I am very well. Just disclosure. I was born in Brazil, so I have a natural kind of tendency towards Latin America, and lived in Argentina as well. So, but I think the Latino audience in America has become a new territory in itself. That GDP, the GDP of that community is greater than Canada's GDP, and several times bigger than Latin Americans. So now what we see is that the super indies and the studios are looking into ways of catering for what is now third generation of Latinos living in America, and looking to see themselves reflected in the screen with stories that are more relevant. So I think that has become a very interesting area for investment.
Great. Well, can we talk just about the overall market that you all see for non-English language content? And I'm very specifically calling it that because I don't think we should call it foreign language, because it depends on where you live. Emily, you said you're working mostly in the English language right now. Not only, though.
Not only for sure, but multilingual projects as well. Non-English is dependent on the direction, quality, festival selection, visibility. I mean, for films, right? I'm not talking about series. That's a very different. So it's all about these great talents that are selected in these major festivals, and that will surprise an audience, an art house audience around the world, which is fragile, as you said, very fragile. Theaters are, falling apart in certain territories. So hopefully we'll manage to grow that, community of filmmakers, audience around the world. Again, build back. How do we do it? That's a tricky thing. I don't know your perspective on that.
I mean, I worry about the UK, which is where I live as a consumer, actually. And there's a real dearth of there's no depth of foreign language, non-English language films in the UK. I mean, there are great distributors like Curzon Picture House, and Movies very active, and
Modern Films, I think, is
But there's just not. I mean, and this is a fact of Brexit. They can't get EU support. There's no incentive in the UK to release non-English language films, and so we're not seeing much acquisition. And the prices that are being paid are shockingly low for a major territory like the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, stunningly low.
Yeah, it is a big. Yeah, it's a
Four figures.
Yes. Oh. And does that include the .00? Yeah. Sometimes, yes. Ricky, I mean, we've seen, obviously, the Nordic noir boom, and different phases of that. I think we've come through that particular phase. But yeah, where do you see the market for Scandinavian language, Nordic languages around the world?
Well, you could say on the TV series side, I'm sorry to say, but Nordic noir is still very popular.
Okay.
And thrillers, and that's how it is. So we like that. But what we also like is that people and distributors, TV stations are very curious to see both other genres and other formats. I mean, we had a TV series called Afterglow from NRK here last year at Cannes Series, and that's, you know, about a woman who gets cancer, and it's not about an illness, but really about embracing life, and that has sold quite well. So I think really the world is ready for other things that Nordic noir, both on the TV series side, but also on the film side. So I think basically it's about, you know, telling a story that matters, that really touches the audience, and sometimes trying new ways and be original. I mean, you've been mentioning strong voice a few times, and I think that's really what matters. And we just need to let the new talent and the young talent that is trying out crazy new stuff, you know, with also new formats, shorter formats, and see what they can do. And then just be able to actually fund them, because that's not easy, especially not in the soft-funded system.
Yeah. I was going to open to questions, but we can't do questions in here, can we? We're on the beach. I think I'm just going to wrap up with another question or two myself. I hope that's okay. What is something, you know, we've talked about some of the challenges, I think, like, you know, people haven't returned to cinemas in the way they were going pre-pandemic, or the streamers have eaten into some of that as well. And just it's hard to get, you know, certain voices produced if you don't have name cast, and then there's crews are too expensive, and yeah, lots of challenges out there. But what would you say, if I can just come to each of you, what's a solution that you can see for any of these challenges? You know, what is something this independent film industry can do to keep itself healthy? Maybe it's embracing new technology, like Elisa said. What can you think of something we can do? Mike, what can we do?
I think, I mean, looking back on Cannes, you think of all the experiences we've all had in Cannes, in that building over there, and you just think cinema is always going to be the place where the venue where amazing directors come from. I mean, most great television tends to involve people from cinema. You know, I don't know, I am confident that the medium itself attracts the most interesting ideas and the sort of revolutionary ideas and revolutionary ways of telling a story. Having said that, of course, television is amazing at the moment as well, but film will always be, I think, special. I mean, I know that people in television all like to work with people from film, so I think I'm confident that now that the platforms have sort of calmed down a bit, that film will have its day again. It's just getting the cinema audiences back, I think, is important.
Yeah. How do we get them back? That's another masterclass.
We have to make original cinema, I think, and that's the thing. We have to make films that get them back. Oh!
What? Uh-oh.
Yorgos, are you okay?
Oh, wow. What?
Drama.
Oh, drama unfolds at the Plage des Palmes.
I think...
Greece's top producer, injured on the Croisette. No, he's okay. Thank you.
I think mediocrity does not work.
Okay, mediocrity is not going to get people back in cinemas. No. They're not going to leave their sofa.
No.
I might stream something mediocre.
Yes.
But I'm not going to leave my house for it.
But that's television. You
and isn't that good?
That. Yeah. And television cinema is not a cheap thing to do these days. So the film has to be good. So I think, you know, it's quite a difficult balancing act to get that right, to get that film that people will leave their homes to see these days.
Ricky, how can we save this business?
No pressure. Well, I think the good thing is that there is a place for everyone. I think that's what we're realizing now through partnerships and so forth. So in that way, I think people, despite the golden age going down a little bit, you know, and not as much money in the business, so we should stick to that for sure. I think one of the I'm really trying to pick my brain here to find out, what would save the world. Well, I think really what we need to do is to bring out the strongest voices and the talent that we can. That would keep on, being relevant for the audiences. We should embrace the future, like you said. So not in the storytelling itself, but bringing data from the storytelling, and that means.
You don't want the AI writing the script.
No,
but the AI can look at the
fun.
box office numbers and tell you where it's working and where to expand.
That's not original cinema.
No.
So basically, in everything that has to do with the pre-production and post, that's going to help us and hopefully lower the budgets and be more efficient. So embrace the future in that way, and then again, co-productions like it used to be, but with new partners. So I think it's trying to revitalize what was good in the past, but doing it in a new way.
I love it. Elisa, where do you see some bright spots here that can help?
Well, it's a bit awkward because I'm not part of the independent film community. So, it's not up to me to say how to do things. But I think just generally, a more open attitude to what's going on around us and not living in the past. I don't think people will go back to the cinemas in the same way because the new generation, they're not going to do that. They consume entertainment in a different way. And, I think the young filmmakers get it and are catering. So I think it is about supporting the new voices and finding originality, but also original ways of reaching the audience.
Yeah, great. And Emily?
Yes. Develop, partner, for sure. So the two things that you were definitely pushing forward, and I agree when you see the different success that had A24 in the US. I think it's also a very different approach to marketing and reaching out to an audience. I think the shift has not fully yet happened to market very differently movies and to sustain these new voices. Distributors are, it's a heavy thing, right? To completely reinvent the wheel and think about new ways to market and reach. It's quite a change that we will have to embrace in the next years, and it's not often, and it's not only by throwing very heavy distribution costs that you reach an audience. So that's
new ways of thinking.
Yeah, that's probably one of the way, and then to have these new voices, you need partners, and sometimes you need committed individual people that are ready to sustain the growth of an artist, a vision, and that's where we think there is also a way to make these movies or these new voices emerge in the future by private investment.
I think there's been some great ideas there. I knew these were going to be 4 of the smartest people in Cannes to tell us what they see going on now and some ideas for how we can all stay relevant, tell some great stories, and look in the future. So really a huge thank you to all of them.